The long-awaited debut of, well, the last pirate, you know him, to whom much is given, much is tested. 4 title fights with Cage Warriors in 9 total fights with the promotion. It's France's Morgan Charriere. He's going to be taking on the Venetian Angel. It is Manolo Zecchini. And when you look at a fight like this, it's wild because these two guys are making their UFC debuts against each other. They both debuted with Cage Warriors on the same card. Morgan Charriere taking on Soren Bach in the co-main event of that card for the featherweight strap. And it was Manolo Zecchini taking on Danny Mathiasson. Unsuccessful in the matchup due to an odd fight for what it was. But when you look at both of these guys, if I didn't watch any of their fights, this is what I did. And I wrote it down in my notes. I wrote, well, Manolo hasn't competed since last October. I don't know why he's on this card. He's definitely the B-side. He's probably going to lose. And I was very, very mistaken. When I watched Manolo Zecchini, I listened to what he had to say in some of his interviews. He did one with All Access MMA and James Lynch on August 22nd. This guy's one of the most likable guys. He's like a male Amanda Hebos. His interviews are great. His English is a little bit broken, but he's super positive. And for years, Zecchini's trained at Jackson Wink, and you've seen the pictures with some of his training partners. Most recently, he spent some time with Dominic Cruz and the guys getting ready. And he said to James that he's been back in his native Italy for the last month, getting ready for this fight. He's going to have Mike Winklejohn in his corner, along with Zecchini's brother and his father, who I've seen corner him in the past. And you got to say this, for Manolo Zecchini, the tattoo, it's aggressive down by the waist. It's ridiculously aggressive. And his hair, it's a mix of his brother's and his father's. Kind of back, but to the side, it's all over the place. When you watch Zecchini fight, though, he grapples when he shouldn't grapple. But boy, oh boy, when this guy strikes, he is on fire. And when I boil this one down, I watched all the way back to Zecchini's fight against Danny Mathiasson. So there's a lot of tape that you can watch that's out there. His last 2 losses, Mathiasson, he struggles in the grappling. He ends up getting tired. He gets beat. And his fight that he had against a very good fighter in Karamutello Sufiev, in that one, Zecchini has success in the striking. And in the grappling, he doesn't, and he ends up losing and nearly getting finished in that one. But for Zecchini, he blitzes forward, he never stops striking, and his leg kicks are really good. He's got great blitzes, and when he has you hurt, he doesn't Jeff Neal it. He just goes straight after the finish. For Morgan Charriere, people have known him for a long time. Again, he fought Saladin Palnas back in a weird ruled, back when French MMA was French MMA, and the rules aren't the same as the rest of MMA.
Well, it was illegal, so.
And Charriere you weren't allowed to strike on the ground, but you could go for submissions. Charriere started off his pro career 2-3, and this is a guy that got into judo at 8. He transitioned MMA at 17. He had a little bit of English boxing to him. But for Charriere, you know him for a giant YouTube channel. You know him for those 4 fights with Cage Warriors. And listen, he's sitting above the Mendoza line. He's 1-4 in title fights with Cage Warriors. But he wasn't able to beat Vucenic. He wasn't able to beat Paul Hughes. He wasn't able to go... When's Paul Hughes going to be in the UFC? We got to say that.
Hopefully soon.
And he wasn't able to beat Soren Bach. But for Charriere, you watch his performances. The power is great, but sometimes he waits to bait for his counter shots, and he doesn't do anything. And then he ends up on the losing end of 8 decisions and the 1 submission loss way back when.
In all of his fights that I watched, he did the exact same thing on the outside, and it does worry me a little bit. He has an incredibly powerful right hand when he's able to time it up, land it down the middle. He kind of throws it as an overhand and a straight at the same time. Has good uppercuts too. He really does have great variety on that shot. But when he slides out a distance, this left hand goes from here to here. And if you have good combinations that can end them with a good right hand, I think you probably could stop him. Like, that's how big of a weakness it does seem to be in a lot of his game. And you bring it up. In a lot of these matchups, too, he'll look good when he does decide to enter the exchanges, but then he'll wait, and he'll wait, and he'll wait. And if he is on that kind of waiting, we'll see what my opponent does in this matchup against Zecchini, then it's going to be really difficult for him to close that distance and make up the difference in the later rounds. But the good thing is, especially in this fight, I think this fight's going to be absolutely insane for the first 4 or 5 minutes. That first round is going to be electric because Manolo does come out and throw a lot of combinations. He tries to use his physicality to push you up against the cage, and once he is able to get you in that position...
He's very much the featherweight version of Claudio Ribeiro at 185.
He kind of is, yeah. And again, he's got good power from both sides too, but I'll be really curious to see if he can pick up on that same weakness. If he can start throwing those combinations, and I don't just mean throw crazy volume and hope something lands, but throw your combinations. I always bring this up. Dan Hardy's the guy who says it. Pick your power shots as different punches. You don't always want the last shot of your combination to be the most devastating. And if Zecchini is able to do that and end some of these combinations with a right hand, I could see him landing, especially in the early goings of this matchup. But the problem is, He also leaves the window open for counters when he is throwing his own offense. And if he is just charging into range without really setting things up from the outside position, I brought the right hand up for Morgan for a reason. Yes, he might be susceptible to that shot, but if he starts landing those up the middle shots, the uppercuts, even the clinch, he does have pretty good dirty boxing when he's able to get that like Daniel Cormier kind of one-handed clinch in. I'll be really interested to see if he does decide to go for some of those closer range exchanges, because I think on the outside, Morgan should have a lot of success.
So you go back and you watch fights for both these guys. For Zecchini, his last time out, it was at Venator FC 12. You know Venator for Marvin Vittori. Emil Mech, when he got that win and jumped up into the air and it became a meme.
Poor Paul Harris.
Against Husamar Paul Harris, but you also know it for Jason Mayhem Miller showing up for middleweight and weighing 209. That really happened in life. So for Zecchini, he's fighting after a win of Michelangelo Colangelo. That's the most Italian name I've ever heard in my life. Zecchini goes out there against Abu Tunkara, and in that one, he's bouncing a lot, he's landing a lot of strikes to all 3 level, but he clinches for no reason. It's really, really odd when Zecchini decides to clinch, because he doesn't do much with it. He gets his hands locked behind your back, and then he tries to go body lock or trip, and his opponents have decent balance, and he's not able to get it done. So against Tunkara, he can't get it done. He eats hooks on the entry, but an overhand right stuns his opponent, and then a flying knee knocks him out. And Zecchini is like Mario Bautista. He loves throwing the flying knees. He loves throwing the jumping switch knee. He absolutely loves it. But he's a power plant when he does decide to throw. His opponent before that for Zecchini, he's taking on Suk Kampasath. And in that one, Suk has a win over Manel Kopp, who fights the next week. That is a real
Ellis
win.
has a win over Gerald Mearshart.
Also had losses against Taylor Lapilus and Jesse Arnett. But in that one, lead hook's able to really land against his opponent. He's landing good kicks. He knocks him out in that one. But it's a blown-up bantamweight at featherweight. I touched on the loss that he had to Sufiev, who Sufiev's only loss of late was to Lee Hammond, who ended up on The Ultimate Fighter. And in that one, Zecchini couldn't really get it done with his striking. He got caught by the counters of his opponent, who is a really good fighter, and then he struggled a lot in the takedowns in it. So for Zecchini, the takedowns could be an issue. With Charriere, we've seen him do the same things in his fights too. He's gone for some takedowns, but he gets reversed pretty easily when he does get on the mat. I go back to Charriere. In his last 3 fights, they're all wins. He beats Daniel Bezant by split decision. He beats Pedro Souza by knockout and Diego Silva by knockout. Those last 2 fighters were blown up bantamweights. And in the fight against Daniel Bezant, Matt, I thought that Bezant won the last 2 rounds of that fight, and I didn't think Charriere got it done. He did a lot in the first round, but in the rounds, he was able to get bucked off. And at the end of it, it was Bezant landing big ground and pound against him. So Charriere has decent wrestling. He has really, really good striking. And he's a giant favorite in this matchup. And I started thinking, before I did any of the tape studies, Charriere, without a shadow of a doubt, this guy's a former Cage Warriors champ. He's always got the belt. But when I watched his fights, even in the wins, there's moments where you go, geez, this guy waits a lot to throw that counter. And Zecchini isn't really the most defensively sound fighter. So we have a look at the Topology votes.
If I could, if you just watched the UFC, I vividly remember watching fights at Craig's house once, and he had some other friends over, and there was a guy who looked at Vicente Luque's record, because it was like 14-9, and he goes, this guy's going to be a scrub. A lot of people who might just watch the UFC might look at Morgan as being 19-10, or sorry, 19-9.
18-9.
18-9, sorry, and think, hey, is this guy really like all that? But when you look at the level of competition throughout his record, it does matter, and that's the thing. I would much rather you fight fighters that we do know and have some losses to them than just beat everybody who's 1-0, 0-1 on your way to a UFC shot.
Morgan Charriere's combined opponent record, 170 wins, 77 losses, and 1 draw. For one, Manolo Zecchini. Listen, this guy's a Venetian Angel. 65-45 and 4, but getting wins that you like to see. If we have a look at the Topology votes, Matt, surprise toss there to you. I'm going to say over under 90% Charriere.
I think they'll be under.
I think they're going to be under. They're over. 1,135 total votes, 92% Charriere, 64% by knockout. For the 8% that have Zecchini, 33% by decision, 49% by knockout. Again, the more tape I watched on Zecchini, the more I have an appreciation of his fighting, and I think he's got a way better shot than the fans and the odds would suggest. I like Charriere with the counter ability, but if he gets down in the first round and the second round, he could very well lose this one on points. So I do have Charriere in this matchup, but I don't like it at all.
There's a reason I bring up one very specific defensive liability for one of the fighters and then just say, hey, the other fighter's got a lot of them. For Manolo, He might not have the one weakness that is quite glaring, but if he does rush in and just try to go, not Bangkok ready, because I mean he's super technical, but just fight one of those just engage early in his career type of fights, I think he's going to get hit by some of those counter shots coming down the middle. I do think the last Pirate, and I don't hate the nickname, honestly. I think he's going to land some of those right hands, especially up the middle, and those should be able to get him a win.
Hopefully he doesn't land the old jab after the bell against Paul Hughes in the 4th round like Charriere did. Rich Mitchell. That guy won't take any crap. He took a point in that one. Both of us going with France's own, the dernier pirate. It's going to be Morgan Charriere to get the win. Some big-time fights on this card, Matt. Polar Pop, Volkan Oezdemir taking on Bogdan Guskov. That's a real fight. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.